Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here with today's Monday stream, the big 5 takeaways of week 4. Number 5, start your fantasy players against the Lions and the Seahawks. This is insane. So we knew the game went over 90 points yesterday. 93 points were scored. Fantasy players went off at all different positions. It was a bonanza. The second half was incredible. But think about this in the future when you're playing your fantasy game, setting your lineups. The Lions have given up the third most points to quarterbacks, fantasy points, 290 yards a game and 2 touchdowns. They're giving up 40 yards on the ground. They're giving up touchdown production. They're the second worst against running backs, 117 yards a game. 5.3 yards per carry, and they're giving up 2 rushing touchdowns per game to running backs. They're also giving up 4.5 catches. The Lions are the 6th worst against wide receivers at 195 yards and a touchdown per game. And against tight ends, yep, they're right there too. They're bottom 7, just 45 yards a game. They do give up 3/4 of a touchdown per game. I know you can't score a quarter of a touchdown in a game, but that's 3 touchdowns in 4 contests, and that's how the math works out. Seahawks, they have one area that's somewhat strength, but we'll throw cold water on that as well. Against quarterbacks, they're bottom 8, 283 yards a game with 1 3/4 touchdowns. And against running backs, they're the 3rd worst, 144 rush yards a game, 5.35 yards per carry, worse than the Lions, and they're giving up 5.5 catches a game, the running backs. Now, Seattle against receivers looks decent. They're middle of the pack, 148 yards a game, 3/4 of a touchdown. However, they haven't really played a lot of great receivers. Like yesterday, it was the Lions. Basically, Chark was out, Amon-Ra St. Brown was out, and they still got torched by Josh Reynolds. So this is not a good defense against receivers. And then, of course, against the tight ends. Lions are bottom 7, 45 yards a game, almost a touchdown a game. Now, the Seahawks numbers are going to be certainly skewed by the TJ Hawkinson eruption against them, but they're the worst in the league because of that game. But even with that, they're giving up 103 yards a game, and they give up 3 touchdowns in 4 games. 2 of those were to Hawkinson yesterday. So that's my big takeaway number 1. When you're setting those lineups, if your players are facing Seahawks or Lions, thumbs up, go with them, break ties in case of those defenses. I do not see scenarios where those defenses are getting much better as time goes on. Big takeaway number 4, it's Kenny Pickett time. All right, I wasn't that impressed, but it's fantasy football, and we definitely got to talk about it. Hey, look, here's the big bright side of Kenny Pickett. Every pass he threw was caught. Of course, 3 of them were caught by the Jets, so we have a little issue there. 3 interceptions on 13 passes, but they all were caught. He throws a catchable football. We got to like that. Now, Najee Harris doesn't like him very much because Kenny Pickett ran for 2 touchdowns. So, and nobody was starting Kenny Pickett because Mitch Trubisky started the game. So no fantasy goodness there. On the day, his 10 completions went for 120 yards. So that was solid. He did run for 15 yards. Those 2 touchdowns were gold. But here was the thing. What happened in the second half? Really, the big difference was George Pickens. In the first half, he had 4 targets from Trubisky, caught 2 for 31. Same amount of targets of Pickett, caught all 4 of them for 71 yards. What we saw there was, so Mitch Trubisky, is throwing the ball too short, I think, because he wanted to keep his job, figure safer, less mistakes. But then when he was throwing downfield, he just simply wasn't accurate. When Pickens made the big play on the Thursday night game in week 3, Pickens had to make an acrobatic catch to even haul that one in. But we see that Kenny Pickett is going to be aggressive with getting the ball to Pickens. And Deontay Johnson had 2 poor halves. We actually saw him yelling with Trubisky in the first half. Deontay didn't catch either of the 2 targets from Trubisky. Now, that was a misnomer because in the past, they had been connecting fine. But even with Pickett, it was 2 targets for Deontay. He caught 2 for 11 yards. Now, what I'm thinking is going to happen here, look, Pickett has nothing to lose, right? And my guess, he has weapons. He is going to be somewhat aggressive. Deontay Johnson has been he's a great player. Let's get that out of the way. He's a great player. He gets open like that. And he's a great friend to a quarterback that wants to get rid of the ball right away. Ben Roethlisberger and then Mitchell Trubisky. But I don't think Kenny Pickens is going to look to get rid of the ball quickly and throw short passes all day long. I think he wants to make a little bit happen. So I think Pickens is the upside player. Deontay Johnson may have more catches when it's all said and done. But I think Pickens is going to definitely flourish with Kenny Pickett. Pickens is a special talent. I thought he was a first-round type talent. There were other reasons that I think the league let him slip in the draft a little bit, but I think we're already seeing that. We see this all the time, right? We see these players that slip, but we kind of know they have these traits and skills. They actually can, produce at that level we were hoping. Now, Pat Freiermuth had a really good game, and both halves were pretty equal. That's good news for him. It wasn't like, he was very involved with Mitch Trubisky. He was very involved with Kenny Pickett. It was Chase Claypool who basically had nothing. He had 2 targets, nothing at all went on. He and Deontay really had a rough day, but Chase Claypool hasn't done a whole lot. Now, him being the slot receiver, a big slot, maybe over practice with time and chemistry with Pickett, maybe Pickett begins to start taking what the zones are going to be giving them. Because if Pickett is going to drive the ball downfield, think about this. This is important. So when teams game planning as quarterbacks, they knew Trubisky wasn't throwing deep. So teams were more willing to compress the defense. Now, if Pickett's going to air it out, defenses will be way more likely to move back in more of a shell and make him be patient and, pick them apart, which he pick them apart. I like that. But so ultimately, we could see Chase Claypool and Johnson have a little resurgence. Not that Johnson wasn't doing well. He's had a great first few games before last week. But again, defenses will force him to adjust. And if Pickett doesn't adjust, he's going to have a rough rookie year. All right, we got the next one. Big takeaway number 3. Oh, that Josh McDaniels. Oh, my goodness. He won. Got to give him that, right? But, man, fantasy-wise, Darren Waller. First of all, no Hunter Renfrow the last 2 games, right? Sounds good. Middle of the field's open. Well, maybe not. 5 targets in each game. Waller had 3 for 22 in week 3, 3 for 24 in week 5. Not what fantasy managers are hoping for. And Foster Moreau, he was out this week 4, but he had 9 targets the prior 2 games. So this was even setting up better for Waller, that there'd be no Moreau, no Renfrow, now even more targets. Nope, didn't happen. And then Josh Jacobs. You know what? I didn't even consider him in start-sit questions where people are putting him against viable wide receivers for flexes. Didn't even put him in the equation. I mean, he had a 19 for 69, a 13 for 66, in 3 games and 2 games ago. It was just really his ultimate, decent floor play, and that was it. And his snap share was decent, 72%, 64. He shot way up to 89, but, man, he totally cashed the check yesterday. 28 carries for $144 and 2 touchdowns. We may not see that again all year, but for those who started him, congratulations. But again, Josh McDaniels, we just don't know what we're getting of our running back. It was working, and he did go with it. Now, Devontae Adams, he had 30 PPR points in week 1. He's had 43 in the 3 games since. Now, he's still fine. The pace that he's on with all that thrown together is 300 fantasy points. That's a good season. You can't argue with that at all. It's very good, elite production. But the ride's been weird. And if that touchdown pace slows down at all, he has 3 touchdowns in 4 games. That could be a little problematic, but we would like to see a more specific focus on creatively getting in the ball. We're not necessarily seeing that, but for right now, he's still fine. I advocated drafting him in the 2nd round, not the 1st. He did fall in the 2nd in a lot of drafts. I think he's a fine 2nd round producer. I still hold my claim that with the 1st round draft capital now over some running backs who stunk, right? But I still think that's where he ends up producing, because I think Josh McDaniels is not going to get the most out of him. And I do see a question. I will get that question after I go through the big 5 takeaways. We have one more. We want to talk about Mac Hollins. So look, Adams has 73 fantasy points. These are PPR points. Mac Hollins has 50, and it's very impressive, right? He's seeing 8 targets a game since week 1. He's been playing at least 87% of snaps in all 4 games. And now he has done a lot of his damage with Hunter Renfrow's been out. He got knocked out of, he got the last play of the game, week 2 set didn't even count, but week 3 and 4 he missed, and Hollins has been very good in those opportunities. He did blow up in week 3. Mac Hollins, though, is still going to remain on the field. He's going to be a part of this offense. So I think at worst, he's a low-end wide receiver 3, a flex. I think he's got that because they're going to throw, and he's going to have favorable matchups, and we already see Josh McDaniels is going to get him the ball. Big takeaway number 2, the Eagles are going to be a weird but good fantasy team this year. So we've seen the ups and downs of Devontae Smith already. In 2 games combined, he has 3 catches for 17 yards. In his other 2 games, 15 for 349 and a touchdown. So basically this is your definite boom bust. And that may not change because we saw yesterday, even though they fell down 14-0, they ended up dominating this game. And the Eagles have an easy schedule this year. They're going to dominate a lot of teams. And if they get ahead on a team, or if they feel that they could just run the ball down their throats, I think there's games where they're going to do that. And then Devontae Smith's other issue is A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, two other great players. So you have three great players to share the ball with. Now, A.J. Brown did tease us with that 155 yards in week one, but since it's been good, but not great. 69, 85, and 95 yards, all good totals. And he has one touchdown. And they're running the ball in a lot in the red zone in the running game. So A.J. Brown's not getting a lot of those red zone looks that you think he'd be perfectly suited for. But again, they have such success at the ground. Why do they need to? And then Dallas Goedert's going to continue to be a strong tight end. He has 60 or more yards in 3 or 4 games. A touchdown. He gets 4 or 6 targets in every game, but the way defenses can't concentrate on him, he'll be just fine. Now, Miles Sanders, this one is, he's done great. His snaps have gone up each week, so he liked that. His fantasy points were on a downward trend. He had 18.5 in the opener, 11.5 in week 2, down to 5.4, and then he erupts with 29 points yesterday. So that was, like I said, though, when we're learning about the Eagles, and they can beat you at the run, they can beat you at the pass, but if they feel that they're able to control a game with the run, they're not afraid to do that. So Miles Sanders is a very, very strong, I'd say top 15 option at this point. And obviously the 29-point week, that's a spike week that not a lot of running backs had that kind of upside right now. Not a stabilizing force, Jalen Hurts. At least 27 fantasy points in 3 or 4 games. His worst game was a 20. Definitely he can beat you with his legs. He can beat you through the air with the great weapons. So that's the ticket of the best of them, that he's the guy. Well, him and Dallas Goedert, for Goedert being a tight end, they're kind of the two that you definitely can count on, for strong performances most week. And then, like I said, A.J. Brown will be fine. You're just not going to probably hit the home run where he's putting up massive games. A couple of them will come, but, and we were not going to argue, because I'd rather have a consistent player that's getting me, 12, 14 points as opposed to the 25 and the 3. So there is value to that. And the last big takeaway, this goes back to Thursday night. Will the Bengals overcome their offensive coaching? Because it is bad. They're already living in that too high safety world. We knew that was coming for Joe Burrow, and we knew that was coming for Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase is one of the players that the too high shells are meant to limit. The most explosive players in the league, you want to limit those explosives. Now, their offensive line is meshing, but the play calling, again, it's most of the time when Burrow's under center, most of the time they're running. When they're in gun, they're mostly passing, and defenses, especially we saw it with the Steelers, we saw it with the Cowboys, very predictable. Now, some defenses don't have the personnel to take advantage of that. Teams with good pass rushers can definitely do that. Now, overall, Burrow's been fine. They've had to chase some points this year, which has helped. And he hasn't thrown an interception since week 1, which is really good. He's been a good floor play in fantasy, not really great ceiling, but he's putting up at least 23 points, in 3 to 4 games. So that's been good. Now it's Joe Mixon. So if you have him for fantasy, you're real happy. You've gotten double-digit points in 3 or 4 games. You've got a couple games over 17, so you're really, really happy with that. But he is killing their offense. He hasn't, since week 13 last year when the Bengals went pass heavy, he's been under 3.5 yards per carry in every regular season game they played. This year, it's been worse. He can't break 3 yards a carry this year. And for the season, he's at 2.7. It is horrible. He's putting them in second and longs when they're running on second and long. He's putting them in third and long. And his vision doesn't seem to be great, and his decisiveness don't seem to be what they were. His vision was much better, in my opinion, in the past. Decisiveness was. And the line isn't doing him a lot of favors either. I will give him that. But nonetheless, he's living on targets. He's averaging 6 targets a game. And as long as Mixon gets targets, he'll be fine for fantasy. But if they, for some reason, stop throwing the ball to him out of the backfield, and they may not, they may keep doing that all year. If it's just going to be on rushing, he scored twice since week 13 of last year in the regular season. So what is that? It's like 10 games. He scored like twice in 10 games. And I don't think that's a surprise. I think that he doesn't get in a rhythm when the team is pass heavy. And anyway, again, it's been a long sample size right now. And then Jamar Chase, in his last 3, he has a total of 37 PPR points. His yardage, 54, 29, and 81. And that 81 he got on Thursday night, he had a couple factors break his way. One was they had a trick play where Tyler Boyd threw him the ball, got him a chunk of yardage. And then when they were trying to put the game away in the last drive, fortunately, Joe Burrow was able to get a downfield shot when the defense was trying to, they didn't play the high shell on that because they were hoping that they could get the ball back. So it was a calculated gamble, and they lost on that. And he got the catch and he got the yards, but it has not been great for Jamar Chase, especially those that invested a top 5 pick in him. Now, T. Higgins, he's been great because Chase is seeing the over-the-top shells. The underneath stuff is open. Higgins runs all over the field, but he's really good in the intermediate area. Huge target, great after the catch. Not like Jamar Chase, great after the catch, but certainly productive. He has at least 71 yards and a touchdown in the last 3. Well, before I get to questions, if you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe buttons. And if you like our content, 2 days free behind the RotoWire paywall with no credit card needed. Just go to rotowire.com/try. Let's get some questions here. All right. Eat Man, if you're still here, you've been waiting a while. So let's see here. Would you do CD for Dalvin Cook in a 7-man league? Well, you probably have good running backs in a 7-team league, and that's the whole point. If you have running backs and you're good at your running backs, you can make this trade. I still think CD Lamb, the first week was bad. They were under a lot of pressure, and Dak Prescott ended up getting hurt. But you see CD Lamb been great with Cooper Rush, and I think he's going to pick right up and take off with Dak Prescott as expected back this week. So as long as you're good at running back, you can make that deal. In a 7-man league, I think you probably all got some real nice squads, so I could see that. Jacob, just traded Metcalf and Pollard for Najee. Did I win? Najee got vultured for 2 touchdowns from Kenny Pickett. Didn't like that. Overall, it's possible that the move to Pickett does help because if he's going to throw downfield, as I talked about earlier, then defenses, if they're not loading the box, that potentially gives Harris more room to run. So I think there's possibility that Harris does well. Metcalf's coming off a couple good games. I still don't. I think you sold at a good time because the Seahawks are terrible on defense. So, the Lions are terrible on defense, I should say. And Metcalf tore them up. And it was a good time to sell because when Geno Smith has moderate to tough matchups, I don't see him. That 7 for 35 that Metcalf had a few weeks ago, I think those are going to be common games. And then Pollard, Pollard's got upside, but he doesn't get the ball enough. So, I think overall with the possibility of Harris maybe seeing a better opportunity, a better situation with Kenny Pickett, I think that could be a win that works for you. Randy, all right, man, good to see you. So tonight's game, it's a tough one. So the big deal for the 49ers is their left tackle, Trent Williams, is out, and he is one of the best run and pass blockers in the league. He's nearly a perfect lineman. I think George Kittle's going to be needed to block a lot more, both the run and the pass game. They're going to have, because the rest of their line is kind of dicey this year. They've lost some people, some continuity. That's been problematic. The one thing that Kyle Shanahan's been able to do is he's been able to deploy Deebo Samuel as a weapon in the passing game where he gets him the ball schemed into space before the corners can engage him. The Rams have never had an answer for it. They're not probably going to have an answer for it. Their personnel is worse than it was last year. So I think that Shanahan is going to go to what he knows works. So it's going to be a big Deebo night for them. I don't know if the running game gets going, especially without Trent Williams, and Jeff Wilson's been fine. But I think ultimately, this is not a high-volume game. 49ers front 7 is nasty. They're covering on the back end. Charvarius Ward, they added a corner, so that's making them a little more difficult for teams to move the ball on. Now, Cooper Kupp's going to get his. The pass rush is going to get there, so I don't know how much time Stafford's going to have to throw because that offensive line is scuffling there. I think this game, there's a chance this game doesn't hit 20 for either team. I see that. Again, I think Deebo does fine. I think Kupp does fine. I think everybody else mostly scuffles. There could be a broken play somewhere where somebody does a little something. Tight ends don't do much against the 49ers. Fred Warner shuts them down. Cam Akers looked decent last week with the 49ers run defense. That's not what you really want to attack. So I just think it's a lot of punts, a few field goals, and but again, those are the players that say, I know Jimmy G's not doing much here, most likely, unless Deebo can break 2 long plays and then pad Jimmy G's stats. Overall, I do think the 49ers pull this one out, but it'll probably come down to the last possession. So the Falcons' backfield, Algier has a couple 10 carries game, and he hasn't been bad. So, I mean, he's going to be involved. Now, Damian Williams may be eligible to come back in week 6. He got hurt in week 1, out 2, 3, 4. So, Damian Williams, I don't know when their bye is, but Damian Williams he was in on the first drive of the first game, so he's part of their offense. So I think he's going to be in. I think ultimately within 2 weeks, it's going to be Algier and Damian Williams. We did see Caleb Huntley get in for 10 touches and look good yesterday, but I think when Williams is back, I think they had a trust level in him. So I think that this week he might be okay, but I think with Williams, and I assume Williams is coming back. It was a ribs injury, so my guess is 4 weeks is more than enough to heal that up. We see players playing in 2 weeks from that, so my guess is he's there. So that's kind of my thought on that. But that offense is a mess, right? Well, it's a mess in some ways. Arthur Smith's doing some good things, but man, they're hardly throwing the ball. CB, Lazard, or Gabe Davis. So I've got to think that Gabe Davis is still struggling from the ankle. And because he's been productive on the work he's gotten in the time he's been in Buffalo. And Josh Allen's going to make things work. And defense has to worry a lot about Stephon Diggs. I think Gabe Davis is still, but that ankle has been an issue. He aggravated in Wednesday's practice. I think they needed him on the field. But I think that Gabe Davis is going to be fine. Allen Lazard had that nice game yesterday. But as you saw, up until that point where they were losing and they had to chase, he was blocking a lot, and that's what he does. Gabe Davis isn't going to do it. Gabe Davis is running a lot more routes, and it's going to be a higher volume offense. So I'm going to go Gabe Davis there. Deschelle, I'm saying your name wrong. I'm sorry. And you're lacking depth in the running back department. Bateman for Damian Harris, a bad trade. So Damian Harris, yeah, he's getting about 17 roughly touches a game. He's productive with them. He's a good running back. He's splitting with Stevenson. Stevenson's getting more snaps, but that doesn't mean the work share has been even. So that's fine there. If you need the running back, look, you got to give up, players. And it's not like Bateman's seeing a ton of targets. Bateman's targets have been low, and he's had a couple big plays to make that work. But on low target volume, it's hard to keep that going. You got Godwin, Keenan Allen be back. Michael Thomas, I don't know what his deal is, but hopefully he's back. And Woods is, Treylon Burks probably be out for a while. He was carted off with a foot. So, I would always shoot for more as a running back. You can always ask for more. But Damian Harris is a good floor for you most weeks. He's going to have a couple bad games, but he's going to have big games too where he gets in the end zone. I think it's a fine target. Try to get better if you can, but if you can't, there's no reason that doesn't work. All right, Just Bob, good to see you. Glad you're here. And CB, how am I feeling? Melvin Gordon. So, as of who they trade for, I'd like to hear whomever they're going to trade for. That's not always easy. Mike Boone's a good running back. And Mike Boone's going to have a lot of work. Melvin Gordon hasn't looked great. I think, you know what? I'm going on a limb here. Mike Boone could see 50% of the work. That wouldn't surprise me. I think Mike Boone at this stage may be just as good as Melvin Gordon. He may be. He's been very explosive. Just never had an opportunity. He's behind Daley Cook in Minnesota, and then he signs over in Denver, and then Denver drafts Javante and brings in Melvin, and but nonetheless, Mike Boone's a good player. And running backs are replaceable as it goes. But I think they're going to be fine with Mike Boone, and Gordon will do what he's doing, fumbling the ball. No, he's a great player. He's having a rough season. He's aging a little bit maybe, but I really think that Boone's a part of this thing. All right, Bob Gordon has some issues. Yeah, oh man, I remember him fumbling in with the Chargers, man, fumbling at the goal line against Denver. Funny enough, there. But I remember he had like 2 or 3 goal line fumbles, but he's a fumbler. He's definitely a fumbler. Yep, Gordon Boone. Yep. All right, looks like we're good. Everybody have a great day. Good luck, and we will see you soon. Follow me on Twitter at Jim Coventry NFL, and remember, hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube.